And pleased to be joined now by Martin Slumbers, the CEO of the R&A, and Mike Whan, CEO of the USGA. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Martin, I'll start with you. How did you arrive at these specific conclusions, and why is this, broadly speaking, important for the game that you govern?
So good morning to you all. So this project has been underway for over 5 years now, and we published our Distance Insights report just before the COVID pandemic. But at that time, it was very clear in our minds that we needed to find a solution to update and change the rules around the ball and work out what is the best way to do that. And over the last 2 years, we have been working with the whole of the industry, examining ideas, seeking feedback, adjusting comment, all with the intention of ensuring that what we were trying to achieve was protecting the integrity of our golf courses, ensuring a variety of skills within the game, but also being very cognizant of our environmental responsibility around the size and the property that golf courses sit on. And over this, we issued a model local rule earlier in the year that received some strong feedback across the industry, mainly around bifurcation and speed. And what we're announcing today is a reflection of all that feedback into a change in the rule that will affect the whole of the game, but changing the speed by which a golf ball is changed becomes conforming. And the impact of that broadly is 15 yards for the fastest, 10 yards for an average tour player, and less than 5 yards for a recreational golfer.
And I'll just add to that, morning, Rich and Damon. I think you both know this, but I'm not sure all of your viewers do. We've been together with the R&A testing golf balls for conformance for over 50 years. And all the way back to 1976, when we set up that test, it was designed to replicate the fastest players in the game. We've updated that test numerous times, 1980, 2002, 2004, but it's been 20 years since we've updated that test. And there is virtually no denying, although some will try, there is no denying what's happened to distance in the last 20 years, and quite frankly, 20 before that. In 2000, the longest players on the tour, which is the most robust data, were 20 yards longer than they were in 1980. And when you jump from 2000 to 2023, it's another 20 yards longer. So an average of about a yard a year, and that's been kind of the pace. So when we look back at our test, we realized that we were testing ball speeds of 176 miles an hour. When you take the top 25 players on tour this year, 2023, and you take their ball speed over the course of a whole season, they average 183 miles an hour. So our test was built at 176, which back in 2002 and 2004 was believed to be kind of the criteria for longest players in the game. So in this change that we've recommended and we're moving forward with in 2028, we'll be ball testing at 183, 125 mile an hour clubhead speed, which in this case will generate 183. So that will more align. Now, neither Martin and I believe in 2028 that the fastest players in the game will be at 183. They'll probably be faster, and that's okay. This is based on what we know today, and we think it'll still be relevant and certainly be a lot more relevant than the 176 we've tested at. As Martin said, it's been a long process, almost 6 years now. We started with research, went to proposals, went to industry comment periods, and those proposals turned into quite a bit of revision, maybe more revision than either Martin and I thought when we started. But there'll be nobody who's been part of this interaction that can claim that their voice isn't part of this final outcome in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean they'll all like it, I get that, but they are definitely embedded in there, whether it was changes we made to how we did the testing, which with a lot of manufacturers helped us on, pace to the market. We were really focused on 2026, but manufacturers and others asked us for more time, which is how we got to 2028. As Martin said, we were pretty focused on a model local rule that will allow us to make changes at the highest level and sort of leave the rest of the game unchanged. But we got pretty clear feedback that if you gave the model local rule to some of the tours around the world, it was unlikely it was going to get implemented. And this has never been a paper exercise for Martin and I, and so creating something that really doesn't affect the game longer term wasn't an option. So we think this strikes the best balance. And I will say there'll be no doubt that over the next week, days, years, there'll be alarmists and there'll be people screaming about distance losses that are just, quite frankly, unfounded relative to the truth. As Martin said, This is going to have a 0 to 5 yard impact on the driver of her average recreational golf, depending on how much ball speed they can generate. I say 0 because about a third of the golf ball models that are already on our conforming list today will still be on our conforming list in 2028. So if you're a golfer who's already playing that front tee and you're using a ball to kind of help you get as much as your game as you can, that ball is more than likely to still be approved in 2028. And so we would see 0 impact. But even if you go to something different, we're talking about something less than less than 5 yards on your driver, and we see no impact from 5-iron down, no matter what level player we're seeing. So I just don't want the alarmist to take over the day. We've been from the very beginning, and Martin's been the loudest, to his credit, from every time, every meeting, every call, every proposal. If it had an impact on the recreational game that we thought could reduce either the excitement, the joy, or the desire to play this game, it's been off the table.
Well, Martin, anecdotally, the game is very popular. People are playing and enjoying it. Why do this now? The timing aspect of it all.
Well, I think the issue about the recreational game and the popularity of the recreational game is a much more nuanced issue than just about the hitting distance of a golf ball. We shouldn't forget that, from the sort of the early 2000s through to just before COVID, golf participation was falling. And what's really happened since that sort of late 2018 period through to where we are today, where we have 100 million people playing the game around the world, consuming the game around the world, and 60 million of those are outside the United States of America, is that you've seen the growth of off-course golf, so driving ranges, par 3 courses, the brilliant Topgolf, and those sorts of things are much more family orientated, much more inclusive, much more about fun, and those are the real reasons that are driving that 100 million around the world. And what we're doing here is ensuring that within the rules of golf, we're protecting the integrity of the way the game is played, we're protecting the integrity of golf courses, and also being very cognizant of the environmental responsibility of the size of our courses.
It is funny, Damon, when we started this in 2018, people said, why do it now? Because the game wasn't growing at a substantial rate. And now that it's growing at a substantial rate, people are saying, why do it now? And even on the now, I'd say, we're talking 2028 and 2030. So I don't think this is now. But if not now, we're really just going to pass a problem to the next generation that we can all see and we all know is there. And just to say, oh, well, in another 30 years, if we're another 25 or 30 yards longer, they'll just figure it out, would not be doing our job.
Mike, if, as you suggest, ball speed is going to be ball speed of 125 is going to be obsolete, why not go deeper? Why not go to 128 right now so we don't have to do this again in a few years? Good
question, Rich. I would tell you that when we were talking about a model local rule and adjusting distance only at the high end of the game, we were talking about club head speed of 127 and ball speed closer to 187, 188. Because we thought if we weren't going to really have any impact on the rest of the game, we could probably be a little bit more aggressive at the high end, where we really need to slow the pace the most. Once we realized that a model local rule would not be implemented across the board at where we actually needed it, we really needed to we could really only assess across the board changes. Once you start talking about across the board changes, the first thing on your list of priorities has to be don't mess with the success and the enjoyment of the game. And so we really felt like 5 yards or less was the max we could really talk about from a recreational game perspective. So we really felt like we had to make a change that we thought was meaningful enough to slow the pace over the long term, and at the same time not so significant that it would actually affect the enjoyment, the interest, and the play of the game. And we think we found that, like I said, this is a balance, but we had to find the right balance there. And so, and again, sometimes we can confuse you in speeds. When we say 125 club head speed to a tour player, they instantly take a 1.5 smash factor and go to a higher spin weight. We don't maximize the smash factor in our factories. And so I think when we talk ball speed, we're at 183 versus moving to 183 versus the 176. But you're right, in 2028, I'm quite certain the fastest players in the game will be generating ball speeds north of 183. That's probably as predictable as anything.
Gentlemen, you expected to hear responses from around the game of golf over the coming days and weeks. We do have some word from the PGA Tour responding to this news today. Throughout the process, we have provided feedback to the USGA and the R&A and are pleased to see a number of our recommendations reflected in this most recent announcement. However, we believe the proposed increase in test clubhead speed to 125 is disproportional to the rate of increase we see when analyzing PGA Tour radar data. In conjunction with guidance from the Player Advisory Council, Player Directors and Policy Board, we will continue to share our feedback with the USGA and the R&A. Martin, is this over then, the comment period over, or will you perhaps listen to what the PGA Tour or others around the world have to say?
Let me put that slightly differently. We have, over the last 5 years, but specifically over the last 2 years when we've been putting proposals on the table, we have gone out of our way between Mike and I and all our teams to listen, to appreciate perspective, and to reflect that perspective where we felt that was proportionate to what we were trying to achieve. And there is no doubt, I think this proposal, I've had said to me that in all the changes in equipment rules and rules of golf, there has never been a better consultation process. Now, inevitably in governance, and Mike uses a phrase, and it's a great phrase, governance is hard. And when you do that, you inevitably cannot accommodate everybody's view. But I think the current proposal, no, the current decision, and to your point, this is a decision that's being announced today, which will be effective in 2028, so another 4.5 years, reflects the combination of all the feedback we've received right across the industry, as well as our desire to ensure that we create a meaningful change at the top end and balance that with a not too meaningful change at the recreational golf. So inevitably, this is a balance, and inevitably, half the people will think we've not done enough, and half the people will think we've done too much. But I think the USGA and the R&A have listened. We have dealt with our responsibilities in regards to this, and we're totally focused on the future of golf and the long-term health of our sport.
Sounds like the decision's final. I want to come to you, Mike. It seems to be a disconnect between your data and the data from the manufacturers and the PGA Tour. How do you account for that?
Yeah, on the comment you just read, Damon, thank you, Rich. I think that's probably going to be similar to a lot of statements, although I don't exactly know how statements will come out. But they'll see and they'll reflect that it's been an open process and they've seen some of their own input in it. And at the same time, it's not the exact output they wanted. And when I say they, fill in the they, because everybody had a slightly different point of view. In the case of the PGA Tour, I think they've really asked us to consider a smaller impact and look at it more often. And I understand that from the viewpoint of just the tour, maybe just adjust our players less, and then if you have to do it more often, which makes sense. But when we're talking about across-the-board change, we simply can't really implement that from a manufacturer. We can't ask manufacturers to adjust their line and then come back again in 5 years and ask them to relook at their line or whatever period. It's pretty disruptive to the whole game. And so I respect the comment. We've talked about it before, but smaller changes more often are difficult and really disruptive to the overall game when we're talking about across-the-board changes. When it comes to data and final decisions, everybody's known how we've walked through this. We've heard all the different points of view. I think the good news is at the end of this, generally, I'd say if I think about 15 different stakeholders that have chimed in at the end, 12, 13, 14 of them said, hey, I think you're going to make a decision. If you make a decision, would you think about this as opposed to fighting whether or not a change is really required for the game longer term? I think there might be a few still arguing that, but generally speaking, no matter what data you look at or how you look at it, you do have to worry about 40 years from now in a different way than you worry about 40 days or 40 weeks from now. And that's really Martin and my job. We don't have ball contracts. I don't have a club deal. I don't have members with a retirement account I'm trying to address. We are put in these positions so that we can govern without bias, look at the game long term, and do what we think could really be great for the game, knowing that everybody else has to look through a different lens when it comes to change. And as Martin said, I use the term a lot, governance is hard. Tonight we'll both go open up our computers and we'll have thousands of emails from people saying, I can't believe you did that. And we'll have the same number of emails from people saying, I can't believe that's all you did. And they'll both be written with the same level of passion. And they'll both be right. I understand that. But this is us about finding a great balance so that our kids and our kids' kids inherit a game that is at least as good as the game we inherited.
The guy or gal, I'll put this to you, Martin, the guy or gal that shoots 92, and as well, those that can shoot 75, 76, faster club head speed on the amateur level, maybe competing for their club championships or state amateur titles, things like that. How will you explain to them that this is in their best interest to be losing, even if it's only 5 yards, but to be losing something in a game that's already really challenging?
Well, I mean, change in any walk of life is always difficult. And when you take a change that we're proposing here, we are asking for all players to understand that what we have at the heart of this is the long-term perspective of the game. And, I am fundamentally of the view that if you look at the ball distance, the hitting distance with drivers over the last 20 years, it has inexorably gone up. I see no reason to believe it won't go up. If you look at it since 1980, it's gone up. Yes, there's been plateaus during periods of time, but those plateaus have always been followed by increases. And we have to be reflective of this whole issue around the environmental sustainability of our sport. You can't keep extending the properties that we build in golf courses on. You can't keep building new tees. And when I look at the amateur game, and I think people have got to put this in perspective, less than 5 yards. We all know that in the recreational game, the difference between your longest drive and your shortest drive is probably around 20 yards. And so this 5 yards is a small piece within that. And I think what we really care about is this long-term future for the game, our environmental responsibility, and protecting the integrity of our golf courses. And I think that is what sits behind this proposal, and that's what I would talk to and have been talking to for so many meetings with so many people around this particular issue.
Mike, I was struck by a survey in Golf Digest last week, a survey of some 600 players. Some 64.6% of those recreational players said they would not abide by the new rules. How much more work does the USGA and R&A have to do going forward to sell this to the recreational player?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Damon. I think at the end of the day, when people, respond to those surveys, you're saying, hey, if you're going to be shorter, would you apply? Would you abide by? Let's just put this in proper perspective. If we're talking about somewhere between 3 to 5 yards for these kind of handicapped golfers, if you really in your local course have a problem with that driving distance, please go up, pick up your white and blue tees, walk up 3 yards, and put them back down. And you can play the same game you want. And quite frankly, we've said this many times, if we implement this and tours around the world want to pick up their tees and move up 20 yards and more than offset the yardage, we have no problem with that. We don't care what this, if you want to make this more scoring, move up 10 yards. But we can't go back on most of these tees on the back tees. And if you're at the very front tee saying, well, there's nowhere for me to go, and if you're on that very front tee with the ball speed and club head speed you're generating, you're probably going to be just fine, because if you're using the right ball for your game, that ball's going to be conforming in 2028, and you'll literally see zero change. So when people talk about change and how do you feel about change, you give the same reaction I'd give. I'm a recreational golfer. I don't want to be any shorter. I don't want the golf course to be any harder. If my golf course in 2028 or in 2030 simply makes the tees I play from 4 yards shorter, my game is 100% the same as it was in 2024. So I just want to make sure that, like I said, there's going to be a lot of ambulance chasers and alarmists that make this seem so much worse than it really is. We've run those stats, Martin's data on what this impact is going to be. We ran by an independent third-party ball expert. We ran it by 3 different ball companies, 2 of which quickly came back to us and said, we agree with your estimates. So I just don't want, I don't want a few loud voices that are trying to get more clicks and more viewers and more phone calls to drive a frenzy that, quite frankly, just isn't based in fact.
Martin, the pushback that I think players receive is that it's difficult for them to make objective decisions when they have financial ties to the manufacturers. Fair enough. But don't you as well, and this goes for Mike and the USGA, have economic pressures that inform your preferences? In other words, the U.S. Open and the Open are the main drivers of revenue for your respective organizations, and it's costly to have to constantly expand the favored venues, not to mention a potential loss of viewership if you're forced to move away from those treasured old ballparks, the old course in Pebble Beach, because distance has made them obsolete.
Rich, we have tried really hard through this process to not make this about specific golf courses, and it is not just about the few courses that you were just talking about. If you look, golf at the elite level is played on thousands of golf courses around the world, and we're seeing this growth consistently. The correlation between hitting distance and golf course length is been going up around the world. And I do think that we need to appreciate that the R&A and the USGA have really taken a much more broad, holistic, cross-the-game view about this. We've taken an awful lot of time. We've taken 5-6 years to do this, a topic that certainly was in my in tray when I joined the R&A, and I know was in Mike's. We've looked at it, all the different angles and the views on this. So this is not about one particular golf course or two particular courses. This is much more about the breadth of the game.
Mike, can't imagine the number of conversations you've had over the past year plus or past years on this topic. Your conversation with companies and club manufacturers, ball manufacturers, potential costs being passed down to the consumer with the changes in R&D. Is that a concern going forward?
Yeah, you're right, Damon. I feel strange sometimes in this seat. I think if you see my bio, I've been a manufacturer, I've been a commissioner, and now I'm at the USGA. So when I'm talking about these different stakeholders, I can't say that I know what it's like to sit in their seat today, but I feel like I've sat in some of these seats. And so there's a reason why I think you'll see in a lot of the feedback statements today that we listened, we made changes, some of their inputs in here, not all of their inputs in here, which, all of them would rather just us follow their plan. But I understand the importance of taking that in. I find it strange sometimes that we will scream at the top of our lungs that this change might cost a ball manufacturer $10 million in R&D when there'll be 70 courses this year that'll spend more than that to kind of to redo their own golf courses and move bunkers back and add tees, et cetera. So distance causes cost, and it'll cause cost one way or the other. Back to Rich's point to Martin, I really feel the need to answer this because a lot of people have said to me, is this really about you guys wanting to bring certain courses back to the U.S. Open? I got to be honest with you, and I'm sure Martin would agree to this. We both have a folder of golf courses that we don't think we can play our highest amateur pro events at anymore for a lot of distance reasons or size of platform reasons. This change we're talking about, and Rich mentioned it earlier, is not significant enough for me to take courses out of that folder and back into the yes folder. It just isn't. And it's not going to stop us from slowly adding courses to that folder over the next 20 or 30 years. I had an argument with a player yesterday morning, and he said, no matter what change you make, we're just going to work with our launch monitors, our coaches, our strength training. We're going to get that back. It may take us a while, but we're going to get back any distance loss that you try to take away. And I said, I completely agree. I agree that in the next 15 or 20 years, we're probably going to be right back to the same distance we are today. But that will be considered a huge success and a win for the game and for Martin and I, because the difference to that in doing nothing is 15, 20, or 25 years from now, we're another 20 or 25 yards longer and creating a problem we really can't fix in the short or longer term. So, yeah, we didn't do this to put a blanket on distance forever. If you're a long player, you're still going to be a long player. If you want to pursue distance as an advantage as a player, you're going to be able to do that and be longer than others. We're just trying to slow the pace of that growth. And I wish I could tell you that this choice brings back thousands of courses that we can no longer play these elite amateur or professional events at. It simply won't, and I'm sorry for those courses to hear that. And so I wish it was about that, but it really isn't.
Martin, why the golf ball and not the driver?
Well, there are three announcements that make up what we're saying today. We've been talking up to now about the golf ball. The other two are concerning the driver. And one is that we will be enhancing testing on drivers for what most people know as the spring-like effect, as a more technical name, but essentially it's the spring-like effect, to ensure that drivers stay within the rules for that after they've been hit multiple times. It's being called driver creep. The third thing, though, is we are talking about, we've had a lot of feedback, which both Mike and I agree, and I felt very strongly about for a long time, about the forgiveness of drivers, particularly in the hands of the elite player. We have not been able to identify a solution that would work in that regard at this point without causing unintended consequences and significant negatives. So the third part of our announcement is actually that we are still very interested in the forgiveness of drivers and want to work with the industry over the next period to identify what options are there to be able to, particularly in the hands of an elite player, make the driver more forgiving, less forgiving, and more importantly, the way to phrase that is reward the center hit, not for the off-center hit. But that is absolutely something we would not want to put into the recreational game, because that would generally make the game much harder.
One thing we know is clearly a monumental day in a game that we all love. Martin Slumbers, Mike Whan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.